At exactly 8:06 on a rainy Monday morning, my 41-year-old chief executive officer looked down at his gold wristwatch, adjusted his designer suit jacket, and smiled like a hunter who had cornered his prey. We stood in the glass atrium lobby of Vanguard Industrial Systems in downtown Dallas, surrounded by employees carrying travel coffee mugs. My boss, Brad Hollingsworth, tapped the face of his watch with his forefinger and spoke loud enough to echo across the marble floor. "Mark, you are exactly 6 minutes late. That is a $750 personal accountability penalty deducted from your paycheck, or you can hand over your security badge and clear out your desk by noon." 6 hours earlier, at 4 o'clock in the morning, I had closed the largest defense manufacturing agreement in Vanguard's 38-year history. For 3 seconds, I stared at Brad, assuming he was testing a piece of executive humor. I let out a weary chuckle. Nobody else in the lobby laughed. The receptionist kept her eyes glued to her monitor. Two engineers took an intense interest in the elevator display, and junior analysts froze mid-step. The smell of coffee mixed with damp wool filled the room. Brad did not smile back. He folded his arms and repeated himself. "I am completely serious, Mark. Policy is policy." I turned around to look at the digital clock mounted behind the front desk. It read 8:06 a.m., 6 minutes. That short sliver of time was worth more to Brad than 26 years of unbroken loyalty, millions in revenue, and dozens of personal sacrifices. "My name's Mark Vance. I am 48 years old, and until that moment, I had dedicated more than half my adult life to Vanguard Industrial Systems." My wife, Laura, often joked that Vanguard was my primary residence and our house in Plano was just a comfortable hotel where I spent weekends. Over 26 years, I missed wedding anniversaries, skipped weekend fishing trips, and took urgent conference calls during Thanksgiving dinners. I began my career at Vanguard in the year 2000 as an entry-level sales representative driving a silver sedan with 200,000 miles on the odometer. Over 2 decades, I built my career customer by customer. I returned calls within 20 minutes, I honored every verbal promise, and I understood that trust was the only currency that mattered. By my 48th birthday, I had earned the title of Senior Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions. For 8 months, one critical deal had consumed my energy. Vantage Aerospace Systems, a defense conglomerate based in Phoenix, was searching for a primary supplier to handle a 7-year component contract worth $310 million. Winning Vantage Aerospace meant transforming Vanguard into a national powerhouse. Every clause of the agreement had been scrutinized through grueling legal sessions. At 7:30 on Sunday night, I kissed Laura on the cheek and retreated into my home study. The emergency virtual negotiation conference began at 8 o'clock. On one side sat 11 senior executives representing Vantage Aerospace. On the other side sat our chief financial officer logging in from Chicago and our legal counsel calling from Houston. Hour after hour, we debated intellectual property indemnification, production timelines, and liability caps. Around 3 in the morning, the lead negotiator for Vantage suggested tabling the discussion until Tuesday afternoon. I could feel momentum slipping away. In enterprise sales, a delay is a slow death. A competing vendor from California had been hunting this account for months. I unmuted my microphone and addressed the Chief Procurement Officer of Vantage Aerospace, Audrey Henderson. "Audrey, before we adjourn tonight, let me ask you one question. When your production lines are running 3 shifts a day, would you rather partner with a vendor who haggles over liability clauses, or the team whose vice president has personally answered every call you made at 2 in the morning for 8 months? Audrey Henderson looked at her notes, looked back at her screen, and smiled softly. "Mark, that is the most convincing argument I have heard all night. Let us sign." At 4 o'clock in the morning, the $310 million contract was executed. Our chief financial officer cheered on screen, declaring I had secured Vanguard's future. I shut my laptop and managed 90 minutes of restless sleep. When my alarm sounded at 5:30 a.m., my eyes felt filled with sand. Laura found me in the kitchen. "You look exhausted," she whispered. "Call in sick." I shook my head and grabbed my keys. "I cannot do that, Laura. We have executive briefing at 8. Brad expects everyone in their seat." The rain started 15 minutes after I hit Interstate 35. A three-vehicle collision near downtown blocked 3 lanes, turning the highway into a standstill. As minutes ticked away, I called my executive assistant, Karen Cooper. Karen, please inform Brad that I am stuck behind a crash on Interstate 35. 10 minutes later, Karen called back. Mark, I gave him the message. He just stared at me and said, noted. Tell him policy applies to everyone. When I pushed through the doors at 8:06 a.m., Brad was waiting like an executioner holding a stopwatch. After he issued his ultimatum, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. I realized I was looking at an insecure 41-year-old manager who valued power over performance. Instead of pleading my case, I slowly unclipped my silver security badge and placed it on the counter. Brad looked stunned. Mark, do you understand the consequences? I nodded calmly. I understand completely, Brad. You know how to read a clock, but you have no idea how to build a business. The initial week following my sudden termination felt like stepping off a speeding train into a silent desert. For 26 years, my life had been dictated by a relentless rhythm of 5 a.m. alarm clocks, morning traffic reports, back-to-back executive meetings, and late-night flight schedules. Suddenly, on Tuesday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. out of habit, shaved, put on a pot of coffee, and walked into the living room only to realize I had nowhere to go. The silence in our home was almost deafening. Laura noticed my disorientation immediately. On Thursday morning, as rain tapped against our kitchen window, she sat down across from me with 2 mugs of hot tea and gently covered my hand. Mark, you have been staring at the same real estate page in the newspaper for 30 minutes without turning it once. I looked down, realizing she was right. I am 48 years old, Laura, I admitted quietly. Corporate America is not particularly kind to 48-year-old executives who walked out without a severance package. Who is going to hire an executive with 26 years of experience when they can hire a 30-year-old for half the salary? Laura leaned forward with unwavering confidence. The right organization will hire you, Mark. And if that organization does not exist yet, then you have spent 26 years learning exactly how to build it yourself. Building a consulting firm from scratch at 48 years old sounds like a romantic idea until you start looking at mortgage payments and tuition. She smiled warmly. We have been smart with our savings, Mark. We survived 2008, and we will survive Brad Hollingsworth. To ensure financial security while I planned my next move, Laura and I restructured our household budget. I listed my restored 1967 classic Chevrolet Corvette for sale online, receiving $42,000 from a collector in Houston 2 days later. We canceled our planned silver anniversary vacation to Europe, and I suspended my country club membership. Selling the classic car hurt my pride slightly, but having $42,000 sitting in our capital account provided an essential financial cushion. Finding a new corporate position proved frustrating. Executive recruiters were initially eager to speak with me after reviewing my track record. However, during formal interviews, corporate ageism emerged. One 34-year-old vice president of talent acquisition at a logistics firm spent 40 minutes asking me about modern digital sales pipelines. When I explained how I leveraged personal relationships to secure a $310 million defense contract, he leaned back and remarked, Mark, your background is impressive, but our leadership team is seeking someone with a longer future runway who fits our youthful corporate culture. Translation was obvious. I was considered too senior, too experienced, and too expensive. 2 weeks later, another headhunter called to inform me that while the client praised my qualifications, they selected a candidate 15 years my junior because they were concerned about long-term retention. My frustration turned into cold anger a month after my departure when Brad Hollingsworth appeared on a national business television network. I was sitting in the living room when Laura called me over to the screen. There stood Brad, wearing a pristine suit in front of the Vanguard Industrial logo with a smug grin. The interviewer congratulated him on Vanguard securing the massive $310 million contract with Vantage Aerospace Systems. Brad beamed at the camera and declared, "Our aggressive new management philosophy and streamlined accountability metrics made this historic Vantage Aerospace partnership possible. It demonstrates what happens when leadership demands absolute discipline." Not once did Brad mention my name. Not once did he acknowledge 8 months of grueling work, midnight Zoom calls, or 4 a.m. negotiation breakthroughs. He had completely erased 26 years of my life to polish his own executive reputation. I picked up the remote control and turned off the television set. Laura looked at me with concern. "Are you all right, Mark?" "I am trying very hard not to allow bitterness to consume me," I replied quietly. She nodded approvingly. "Good, because bitterness is a toxic poison that you swallow while expecting the other person to suffer." 3 days after that broadcast, my mobile phone rang while I was organizing tools in the garage. The incoming caller ID displayed a Phoenix area code that I recognized instantly. I answered with a professional tone. "Mark Vance speaking." "Mark, this is Audrey Henderson, Chief Procurement Officer at Vantage Aerospace Systems." I stood up straight, setting down my wrench. "Audrey, it is wonderful to hear your voice. I hope everything is moving smoothly with contract integration." There was a long silence on the line. Finally, Audrey spoke in a serious tone. "Mark, I just learned yesterday afternoon that you are no longer with Vanguard Industrial Systems. I heard a rumor that you were separated from the company the very morning after our deal was executed. Is that true?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, Audrey, it is true. Brad Hollingsworth terminated my employment at 8:06 a.m. on Monday morning because I arrived 6 minutes late due to a fatal multi-car accident on Interstate 35. Audrey let out a sharp gasp over the phone. "Are you telling me that after you spent 8 months earning our trust and stayed awake until 4 a.m. to seal a $310 million deal, your chief executive officer fired you over 6 minutes of traffic delay?" "That is correct," I confirmed. Brad called it enforcing executive accountability policy. Audrey did not speak for 5 full seconds. When she spoke again, her tone was icy with indignation. "The very next morning, I officially registered Vance Strategic Partners as a limited liability company in the state of Texas. I converted a corner of our home garage into a functional working office, installing a wooden desk I purchased online, a filing cabinet, and a high-speed internet connection. My daughter created a clean, professional website outlining our core expertise in industrial supply chain optimization, strategic defense procurement, and executive negotiation. Seeing the words Mark Vance, founder and principal consultant, printed on my new business cards brought a surge of quiet pride that no corporate vice presidency had ever provided. During the first 2 months, business development required persistent effort. I reached out to mid-sized manufacturing executives across Texas and Oklahoma, offering specialized consulting to streamline their supply chains. My first paying client was a precision hydraulics manufacturer in Tulsa, whose chief executive officer had known me for 15 years. When I asked why he chose my small consulting firm over established national agencies, he shrugged and offered a simple answer. "Because when I call Vance Strategic Partners at 6 on a Saturday evening, I know Mark Vance is going to answer the phone himself." While my firm began generating steady revenue, significant developments were unfolding inside Vanguard Industrial Systems. 4 months after my departure, I received a phone call from Howard Gable, the retired chief operating officer of Vanguard. Howard was 64 years old, a legendary figure in Texas manufacturing who had spent nearly 40 years building Vanguard before retiring to his ranch near Fort Worth. He asked me to meet him for lunch at a quiet steakhouse in Arlington. When I arrived, Howard greeted me with a firm handshake and slid a thick leather folder across the table. "Mark, I think you need to review these internal documents," he said gravely. "After your departure, several members of the board reached out to me privately because they felt uneasy about the direction Brad Hollingsworth was taking the company." I took the folder and opened it. Inside were copies of internal executive reports, financial disclosures, and board meeting minutes from the preceding quarter. My jaw tightened as I read page 4 of the executive briefing. Brad Hollingsworth had presented the $310 million Vantage Aerospace contract to the board of directors as a personal strategic victory, engineered entirely by his executive office. My name had been completely excised from the official corporate record, categorized merely as routine administrative support provided by outgoing staff. Howard watched my reaction closely. "Brad lied to the board, Mark. He took full credit for your work to justify a $2 million performance bonus from the compensation committee." Furthermore, the documents revealed a disturbing pattern of systematic corporate purging. Over the preceding 90 days, Brad had quietly terminated or forced out 7 senior department heads, all of whom were over 50 years of age and possessed more than 20 years of tenure at Vanguard. Officially, Brad labeled these separations as strategic corporate restructuring aimed at reducing operational overhead. In reality, he was eliminating experienced executives who dared to question his authority, replacing them with junior managers who earned 1/3 of the salary but lacked technical knowledge. "You are not the only victim, Mark," Howard explained, taking a sip of iced tea. "Brad is executing a predatory strategy. He is cutting high-salaried senior talent to artificially inflate short-term quarterly profit margins, which boosts the stock price just long enough for his executive stock options to vest. But he is destroying the operational foundation of Vanguard in the process." The human cost of Brad's arrogance became even clearer when my former assistant, Karen Cooper, called me 2 weeks later. She had resigned from Vanguard after witnessing the toxic environment deteriorate into paranoia. "Mark, it is complete chaos inside the building," she reported. "Brad replaced your entire enterprise management team with 4 25-year-old junior managers who have never managed a defense contract in their lives. They do not understand technical specifications. They miss delivery milestones, and they spend half their time creating PowerPoint slides to cover up mistakes." Even more concerning was a call I received from junior analyst Brandon Reed, who had recently resigned to accept a position at another firm. Brandon informed me that Brad had authorized Vanguard's engineering team to integrate a proprietary supply chain optimization software algorithm into Vanguard's commercial client portal. That software system, known internally as Vanguard Streamline, was not owned by Vanguard. It was a custom analytical architecture that I had personally designed, coded, and copyrighted back in 1998, 2 years before I ever joined Vanguard. When I signed my employment agreement with Vanguard in the year 2000, I explicitly retained individual ownership of my proprietary analytical frameworks under a documented intellectual property reservation clause, granting Vanguard only a non-exclusive license that automatically revoked upon the termination of my employment. By continuing to commercialize my proprietary system after firing me, Brad Hollingsworth was committing deliberate, ongoing intellectual property infringement. I immediately scheduled a consultation with a senior corporate attorney in Dallas who specialized in federal labor law, corporate governance, and intellectual property litigation. After examining my original 1998 copyright registrations, my employment agreement, and Vanguard's internal documents, the attorney leaned back in his chair with a sharp smile. "Mark, your former chief executive officer has exposed himself and Vanguard Industrial to severe legal liability on multiple fronts. First, under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, and Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 271. Vanguard's unauthorized commercial deployment of your copyrighted supply chain software constitutes willful federal intellectual property infringement, entitling you to statutory damages and an immediate federal injunction." Exactly 6 months after I walked out of Vanguard Industrial Systems carrying my cardboard box, my phone rang at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. The caller was Nancy Holloway, corporate secretary for Vanguard's board of directors. Her voice was polished, but I detected an underlying current of anxiety. "Good morning, Mark. Board Chairman Thomas Albright has requested your presence at an extraordinary executive session of the board of directors this morning at 10 o'clock at corporate headquarters." I hesitated, looking out the window at the morning sun. "Nancy, I no longer work for Vanguard. If Chairman Albright wishes to discuss corporate strategy, he can schedule a formal consultation through Van Strategic Partners." Nancy paused before replying in a hushed tone. "Mark, this is not about routine strategy. Chairman Albright received your attorney's legal notice yesterday evening. The board has convened an emergency session, and we desperately need you to present the facts directly to the directors." At 9:45 a.m., I pulled my truck into the visitor parking space at Vanguard Industrial Systems. Walking back into the glass atrium felt surreal. The atmosphere inside the lobby was visibly strained. Employees walked with their heads down. Conversations were held in quiet whispers, and an unmistakable sense of corporate dread hovered over the floor. When I stepped out of the elevator on the executive floor, Nancy Holloway met me immediately and escorted me toward the main boardroom. The boardroom was impressive, featuring a massive oval mahogany table, leather executive chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Dallas. Seated around the table were 12 members of the board of directors. Seasoned corporate leaders, retired military generals, and major institutional investors. Conspicuously absent from the room was Chief Executive Officer Brad Hollingsworth. Board Chairman Thomas Albright, a distinguished 72-year-old former manufacturing executive with sharp blue eyes and silver hair, stood up immediately and extended his hand. "Mark, thank you for accepting our invitation on such short notice. Please take a seat." I sat down at the center of the table, placing a neatly organized leather binder in front of me. Thomas Albright leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "Mark, your legal counsel has presented extremely serious allegations regarding intellectual property infringement under Title 17 of the United States Code. Section 106, systematic violations of the Warren Act under Title 29 of the United States Code. Section 2101, and material misrepresentations by our executive leadership. Before we address those legal matters, the board needs to hear the precise truth regarding the execution of the $310 million Vantage Aerospace contract and the events of Monday morning, 6 months ago." For the next 30 minutes, I presented a clear, unemotional account of the Vantage Aerospace acquisition. I opened my binder and distributed verified documentary evidence to every director at the table. Certified Zoom meeting logs from Sunday night, time-stamped contract revision histories, showing my personal authoring of 85% of final agreement clauses, and the original email sent by Vantage Aerospace Chief Procurement Officer Audrey Henderson at 4:19 a.m. celebrating our breakthrough. I then addressed the events of Monday morning. I presented the official police traffic incident report, confirming the fatal multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 35 that had delayed thousands of commuters, along with my mobile phone records, proving I had notified executive staff at 7:54 a.m. I described how Brad Hollingsworth had confronted me in the lobby at 8:06 a.m., demanding a $750 personal financial penalty or my immediate resignation. Chairman Thomas Albright turned his attention to Vanguard's Vice President of Human Resources, who sat at the far end of the table looking terrified. Thomas spoke in a low tone. "Is there any record in our corporate bylaws, executive policy manuals, or board resolutions authorizing a $750 personal financial penalty for executive traffic delays?" The HR Vice President swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she responded. "No, Chairman Albright, there is no such policy. Mr. Brooks instructed HR to verbally enforce what he called an executive discipline protocol 2 months prior to Mark's departure. It was never submitted to legal counsel, never approved by HR, and never presented to the board of directors." Thomas Albright's expression turned to stone. "So Mr. Brooks fabricated an arbitrary financial penalty out of thin air, lacked the legal authority to enforce it, and used it to force out our Senior Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions hours, after he closed a $310 million contract." Before the HR Vice President could answer, the large video monitor at the front of the boardroom chimed, connecting a secure video feed from Phoenix, Arizona. Audrey Henderson, Chief Procurement Officer of Vantage Aerospace Systems, appeared on the screen. Chairman Albright greeted her respectfully. "Ms. Henderson, thank you for joining our executive session. We are evaluating our ongoing partnership with Vantage Aerospace." Audrey Henderson looked directly into the camera, her tone firm and unyielding. "Chairman Albright, I will be completely blunt with your board. Vantage Aerospace signed a $310 million contract with Vanguard because of Mark Vance's proven integrity, deep technical knowledge, and 30 years of industry trust. Over the past 6 months, under Brad Hollingsworth's leadership, Vanguard has missed 3 consecutive production milestones, assigned inexperienced junior managers who cannot answer basic engineering queries, and demonstrated an appalling lack of operational competence. Audrey paused, allowing her words to settle over the silent room. A full year after I walked out of Vanguard Industrial Systems carrying my cardboard box, my daily routine looks entirely different, yet deeply fulfilling. I still wake up at 5 o'clock every morning before the Texas sun rises over the horizon. However, I no longer wake up to the anxious pressure of corporate mandates or arbitrary executive demands. I wake up with a profound sense of purpose and freedom, knowing that every hour of effort I expend builds an organization rooted in integrity, respect, and genuine human connection. Instead of navigating chaotic highway traffic toward downtown Dallas, I pour 2 mugs of fresh coffee, walk out onto our back patio in Plano, and sit beside Laura as the morning sky turns shades of orange and gold. We listen to the birds in the oak trees, talk about our daughter's upcoming college graduation, and enjoy the quiet peace of a life well lived. Laura often smiles, reminding me how much happier and healthier I look now, compared to the frantic years when corporate politics consumed my every waking thought. Vance Strategic Partners has expanded far beyond the modest folding desk in our home garage. We recently moved into a beautiful 2-story brick office building in Richardson, surrounded by shady pine trees and featuring a welcoming courtyard. Our corporate logo is understated, but the culture inside our building is vibrant and thriving. We now employ 9 dedicated professionals, including my former assistant Karen Cooper, who serves as Vice President of Operations, and young Brandon Reed, who has developed into one of the sharpest analytical consultants in the Texas defense sector. Even Howard Gable spends 2 days a week in the office as our senior advisory partner, sharing 40 years of industrial wisdom with our growing team. We have built our firm upon a fundamental philosophy. We treat our employees with dignity, we honor our commitments to clients, and we never allow arrogant metrics to override human decency. Every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, our entire team gathers in the sunlit conference room for our weekly briefing. There are no rigid corporate speeches, no intimidating performance scorecards, and no aggressive executive threats. We order fresh breakfast tacos from a local Mexican bakery, pour hot coffee, and discuss our weekly goals in an atmosphere of mutual support and open collaboration. We review client progress, celebrate individual achievements, and offer help to anyone facing a complex challenge. On a rainy Thursday morning 3 months ago, Brandon Reed rushed into the office at 8:15 a.m., looking visibly panicked and flustered. "I am terribly sorry I am late, Mark," he stammered nervously, checking his watch. "There was a major accident on the tollway, and my alarm failed to go off this morning. Please deduct whatever penalty is appropriate from my compensation." The entire office went quiet for a moment. I looked at the young man, remembering with vivid clarity the exact terror I had felt standing in Vanguard's lobby a year earlier. I smiled warmly, walked over to Brandon, and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Brandon, did you sleep late because you do not care about your work?" I asked gently. "No, Mark, absolutely not," he replied earnestly. "Did you stay out late partying?" "No, sir. I was working on the Vantage Aerospace supply audit until midnight." I chuckled softly and handed him a $20 bill from my wallet. "Then today is not a reflection of your character, Brandon. It is simply a rainy Thursday morning. Take this $20, walk across the courtyard to the bakery, and buy yourself a hot breakfast sandwich and a fresh coffee." Brandon stared at me in disbelief, a massive wave of relief washing over his face as he let out a long breath. That single moment reinforced everything I believed about leadership. Organizations do not build loyalty through intimidation. They earn loyalty through empathy and respect. Vance Strategic Partners is now a highly profitable enterprise. We manage strategic procurement consulting for 11 major industrial clients across the Southwest, including a comprehensive 7-year advisory retainer with Audrey Henderson at Vantage Aerospace Systems. We generate more than enough revenue to provide full health benefits, generous profit-sharing bonuses for our team, and comfortable financial security for Laura and me. Late one Friday afternoon last month, as rain tapped against my office window, my receptionist announced an unexpected visitor waiting in the lobby. I looked up from my desk to see Brad Hollingsworth standing quietly near the door. He was dressed in a simple navy blazer without a tie, carrying a leather portfolio under his arm. He looked noticeably older, his forehead lined with stress, and the arrogant bravado that once defined him was entirely gone. After his publicized termination from Vanguard, Brad had struggled to find an executive position. Eventually starting a small independent brokerage firm, I invited him into my office and offered him a seat. Brad sat down slowly, staring at the floor for several seconds before looking up at me with genuine remorse in his eyes. "Mark," he began, his voice quiet and hesitating, "I came here today because I owe you a sincere, unreserved apology. Over the past year, after losing everything I thought defined me, I finally realized how terribly I treated you and so many others at Vanguard. I confused rigid authority with true leadership, and I allowed my personal ego to destroy relationships that had taken decades to build." I listened quietly, appreciating the courage it took for him to walk into my office and utter those words. I did not harbor anger, nor did I seek further retribution. "Brad," I responded calmly, "I accept your apology.